for somebody who achieves a designation, first of all, you get a title behind your name. So when you sign your signature, immediately you can see that this person has been designated conferred with this designation. So for from an individual point of view, this means that you've already been tested. So it's kind of like your own brand that you're putting out there, saying, I, as an individual, have been tested and have been found competent, and therefore have been designated for a certain designation. So there's a lot of value for an individual to have a designation against their name. There are a lot of corporate companies are particular about who they employ, and they look for people who are designated and have a professional designation. And also, if, as Catherine alluded to yesterday, as a consultant or starting a small business in the field of supply chain management, if you have a designation in one of the fields of supply chain management, that's certainly going to set you up, and you'll set your business up and your consultancy business up for success. Because it's an acknowledged fact that you have the experience to be able to do that job. One of the key things around designations and professionalization that is important to understand is the concept of continuous professional development. So as a designated person, as being conferred with the designation, you have a responsibility to keep your knowledge current, so that designation remains with you for the lifetime of your career. And the ways you can do that are by attending seminars, doing some additional training. Also, you can give back to the community by teaching or mentoring. And all of those things add CPD, what's called CPD, Continuous Professional Development Points, to your designation. So every couple of years, the designating body will ask you to present what it is that you have done to maintain your designation. And that is linked very closely with membership to the professional body, such as CIPS.
The contribution that professionals are making. And I know that procurement usually reports into finance, and therein lies the folly, because at an executive level, usually we report into finance. So typically we would rely on finance to make those executive level decisions for us. It has its pros and it has its cons, because being a part of finance means that, of course, we're involved in the budgeting process through to the spending of the money, so to speak. So literally, procurement then has the opportunity to manage the purse strings within any organization. So in terms of the professionalization, I mean, I really value what CIPS has done, because I think since CIPS has come into the country over the last many years, we've seen the development and the professionalism like no other, prior to CIPS. I actually waited for CIPS to come into the country at the time when Karen van Vieren was actually bringing it into the country, and I decided, well, this is something that I'd like to do to gain my accreditation. And since then, of course, that's why I lecture CIPS as well. And it's been a journey, it's been a transition in terms of the profession. I do think that we do need, in terms of not only women, but the profession as a whole, we do need a lot more exposure. Now, if we take the manner in which procurement operates, whether it's supply chain management, whether it's procurement, if we look at how we operate in an organization, we do not operate as a vertical function of the organization. We operate laterally across the entire organization. We are influencing all departments. We have a say in everything that happens in the organization. And more so now than ever, Phumzile, procurement is being relied upon to contribute to the bottom line, especially since the COVID pandemic. Globally, we've seen that no longer do companies have this vast amount of money that they can spend. There's the tightening of the purse strings and the tightening of the budgets, the reducing of the expenses to ensure sustainability of the organizations. So procurement is making a valuable contribution to the bottom line of organizations. Procurement is becoming the heart and the soul of all businesses, large and small. For the procurement practitioner, and I like what was said by the other speakers about, knowing your markets, knowing the compliance in the markets. Compliance is a big swing. We've seen this year that POPI came into effect, and that was a new regulation. So every year, procurement practitioners are dealing with new legislation. From 2014, we were dealing with the changes in the LRA, the deeming provisions, the equal pay for equal work, and so forth. We were dealing with lots of issues brought about by unionization and, the unions, etc. So there's lots that has happened across markets, and procurement practitioners need to understand the legislation, which is a very, very valid point. From there lies the corruption and, the bribery and the fraud, etc. So Phumzile, I've also been in procurement for more than 20 years. And I want to share that, when I first started in procurement, there was no such a thing as corruption. If a supplier gave you a gift, it was all in good favor in terms of the relationship. It meant absolutely nothing. So there were Christmas gifts, there were those sort of things that transpired, but without favoring one supplier over and above the other suppliers. However, these days, because of corruption, the procurement professional needs to understand the legislation, needs to understand what processes are in place to root out the corruption that can favor one supplier over the other. What we're finding in the field is that the more competitive our processes are, and the more that procurement is involved in those processes, the more robust the process becomes, and the less opportunity there is for fraud and corruption in organizations, simply because there is an understanding from procurement in terms of the due diligence processes. We also understand the competitiveness of the markets and how to bring that into our organization. So I think there's a huge challenge. There are larger burdens being placed on procurement practitioners, and I like the industry body that's being formed now. Hopefully we can drive more value. Women are in procurement, and there's lots of good, strong women that are running procurement in large organizations, and I do believe we need to also find some mechanism by which we could show value to the women that are driving the profession. And lastly, I'd like to say that, I've watched numerous individuals come through the ranks, gain their MCIPS accreditation, and it's amazing how they've changed and turned their careers and brought about such value to their organization. So for me, that is awesome. It's such a pleasure to watch the profession develop, to see people becoming more and more embedded into procurement organizations.
I started my life as a secretary. That's the only qualification that I have. And through different sorts of jobs, opportunities, meeting different people, I've evolved into my career rather than learning, having steps and making a sort of a professional career path. It's not been easy. So therefore, professionalization and what the work that's being done by the Interim Supply Chain Council, SAPICS, CIPS, etc., what that's going to do is it's going to make it a slightly more straightforward route to designation. However, we have to remember that supply chain management is a complex field. And therein lies our greatest challenge, is that we have professionals that work across multiple industries, performing supply chain best practice that ranges from procurement to materials handling.